really? Why is that not live?
Now it's live. I think you've clicked off before.
Yeah, but I just clicked over here. I didn't even press anything when I came back. That's weird. That's never done that.
Yeah, I think you just clicked off.
Okay, so if we're looking at what are the actual best plyometric exercises for athletes, we've got to understand that plyometric movements are going to be based off of, sorry everybody on TikTok and Instagram, plyometric exercises are going to be based off of maximum force applied in a short period of time. Speed, strength, okay? So we're looking at speed, strength, typically, okay? And if we think through the lens of speed, strength, I would challenge, a little more clarity on that terminology, and I think this is where the world of sports performance could improve the terminology that we're using. And I'm going to go back over some of the stuff here is that if we look at, let's just say, a research that's based off of how do we increase vertical jump, okay? Vertical jump is a type of plyometric, okay? It is a jumping exercise. Typically, that's one of the easiest ways to use or to think about plyometrics is through this jumping pattern. Almost maybe some, I think it was Verkhoshansky or maybe Yeesus. Yeesus might have been the one that called them power metrics. Mel Siff, maybe one of them said power metrics might be a better term instead of plyometrics. But then when we're looking at it and you say, okay, if we are coming up with the most effective plyometric exercises for athletes, first identify what is a plyometric. Okay, it's a maximum force in a very short period of time. Okay, so typically you're going to do some jumping movement, either bilaterally or unilaterally. We're going to do that at a very, very high speed. Okay, so there's a short period of time. Okay, there's going to be some type of intent. So you're going to be trying to get over something or jump over something like a hurdle or a box or anything along those lines. Okay, so that's like that next big aspect. Then we're going to try to base that off of, okay, what are we going to see out of that? Okay, so if we're trying to, going back to that research paper where they took weightlifting derivatives like a power snatch or a clean or a jerk or, muscle snatch, whatever, and they compared after 6 to 8 weeks, what's the vertical jump improvement from an Olympic weightlifting movement? Okay, you could see about a 5 to 6% improvement. When you look at plyometrics, you're going to see almost an identical improvement, like 5 to 6% in that broad or in that vertical jump, and that's typically going to be with intermediate trained athletes. So I think some of the most important aspects then is to understand that plyometric exercises generally are going to be considered they're going to be considered a movement pattern that is done very quickly with some jumping component, and that can include your upper body. Okay, I think oftentimes when you say jumping, people just think leg wise, and they're not really thinking about their upper body and power output or impulse production from the upper body. And I almost think too, recently this past weekend I had a podcast with a biomechanist that was like an hour and a half long, and we were actually talking about things like this. Should it be called power metric? Should it be called impulse output, impulse production? And honestly, impulse production might be like a really, really good term that we've got to build from in this realm of sports performance, because everything around like plyometrics or even things like basic like strength, like the definitions are just like, there's a lot of ambiguity around these terms. Okay, even power itself is not even the way we use it in sports performance is really not even the best way to identify power, the way we term it. Anyway, getting back on track here. So what are the goals of plyometric training is that if we can understand in plyometric training, right, that typically what ends up happening is we want to see the fastest rate of coordination from the nervous system possible. Okay, so maybe the fastest effective rate of coordination from the nervous system that we can possibly get. So if we can have this rapid rate of coordination, okay, ideally, if the faster that rate of coordination gets, the more stable the individual is in their movement pattern, okay? So if they're more stable, they get better rate of coordination, they can produce force faster, okay? So that's where we see that impulse production. And then things like, and this was actually a discussion I had yesterday with the same biomechanist, is that then we're seeing something like body weight ratio. So we're looking at a ratio of body weight to impulse production is really, really tantamount or paramount, I guess, to the overarching theme that we're trying to work towards. And that's really, we're trying to get people to react faster. We're trying to get people to jump higher. We're trying to get people to be more stable in one-legged jumps and bilateral jumps, cutting different directions. We want to get their trunk to be more stable. And then ultimately we want to get these exercises or these movement patterns or these movement series to transfer well to their sport, so we can start to see consistent movement sequences that happen in an individual sport, and then try to mimic them a little bit. So then the skills that you get from plyometrics, like co-contractions or even pre-tension, now when those things get practiced and they get dialed in, they can be built upon over a long period of time. Okay, so that's like some of the major goals that we can get out of plyometric-based training. And if you can clarify that to the athlete, and if you can understand what that means long-term, all of a sudden the athlete has just a better grasp and a better understanding of where they're at in their periodization and how they're going to build everything upon that. And so I think that's really, really important. Now, how I program plyometrics for my athletes is like, oftentimes I want to look at, if I look at somebody who's let's say from 8th grade to high school to college, I'll give you 3 scenarios. Okay. I'm going to look at, let's test their vertical jump, or let's test their broad jump. Okay. And then I'm going to look at how frequently are we doing plyometrics in their training right now. Let me see this. Ignore limit. Andrew, there's a oh, there we go. Sorry, there was a limit on our Instagram live stream. Now we're back up. Okay, so if we're looking at this then, and we're saying, okay, how with an 8th grader, right? I would look at broad jump, vertical jump. Okay. Interestingly enough, if I notice that their broad jump or their vertical jump are lower, I then try to look at a ratio with what their back squat or their front squat or their cleans are. Okay, we've seen in research that plyometrics, or we've seen that weightlifting movements can improve a vertical jump. So then I start to think about how little of my toolbox can I use to bump up their vertical jump or to bump up their broad jump. Okay, so what the reason being, I want to use as few tools as possible, because each time that I use a tool, their body creates an adaptation, which then in the long-term future might make that tool less effective. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So if I can increase an 8th grader's vertical jump right now so that they could, let's just say, start in their sport as a freshman in high school, I might just look at a back squat, or I might just look at a clean. Now, when they're a senior in high school, and if we know that they're going to some test, or if they're a baseball player and they're about to get tested at a camp, well, then we might have to increase and we notice that their broad jump or their vertical jump isn't where it needs to be. Well, then we might do plyometric training specifically for their broad jump, where they do like depth drop to broads. Okay, and we might try to increase their weightlifting movement. So we might try to improve with like a high hang snatch or a power clean or something like that. Then as we try to periodize this further, actually, I'm going to use an example. I was just texting with Taiji Leach, who just had a little bit of so he was part of our pro group this year, pro day guys, trained with us for about 75 days leading into his pro day at Georgia State. Got a call from the Falcons actually to go to the sort of like that next step testing before the draft. And before they start to sign these younger guys that are coming out. So with Taiji, what we did was we go, okay, Taiji's vertical, when we tested him, was 28 inches, which was not good, right? So then we had to look at, okay, what's his vertical jump? What's his clean or his snatch? What's his broad jump? What's his front squat? How frequently can we do plyometrics in training to improve his vertical jump and his broad jump, while also minimizing stress on his body, so we can also get better at the 40. So we have to start to think through that lens. Is like, okay, now at that basically at the professional level or at the collegiate level, now you have to start to think about those tools that you might have used in the past, or the tools that these individuals have been exposed to in the past, and then bring in new tools that, in this case with Taiji, he had never done a 2-box power snatch. So it was like, okay, we got him to like 32 inches, and then all of a sudden it was like, all right, we're going to do two-box power snatches basically every single day or twice a week, and we're going to do plyometrics twice a week. Okay, so we got to do the plyometric movements twice a week to try and increase his speed, and then the plyometric movements with the weightlifting derivatives to try and increase his vertical and his broad jump. And so he ended up going, over those 75 days from a 28-inch test in the beginning to all of a sudden at his pro day, 34.5 inches on a touch. And it was actually 2 different tests, so that's what's even crazier. Then we looked at his broad jump. When he tested his broad jump, 8.9. When he tested his broad jump at the pro day, 10.5. Okay, so we're seeing like a big response, but it was mainly because we knew what tools had been used, what plyometrics had been used or not used, and then we could sort of program that into it. So on the base level with like the kid in 8th grade or a kid in high school, typically we're going to do plyometrics on the 3rd day of training during the week, and we might put it in on a 4th day if we're doing like impulse work or anything along those lines, where we're starting to look at some specific issues with their impulse. The next thing then would be, okay, if I'm programming plyometrics, once kids start to get really elite, okay, and I'll bring up like Nick Singleton, starting running back at Penn State. Okay, so with Nicholas, some of the most important things that we did is that we started to use something. I mean, we even did this with Jan Johnson when he was going to the Titans. Was, okay, he's a linebacker. We created this movement series called the Reckless V jump. And basically you jump forward, you jump, and then you turn 180 degrees, you land, and then you bound. And the reason being is that I'm trying to train with plyometric movements, not just locomotive movements to go forward as fast as possible. Remember, maximum force in a very short period of time. We're trying to improve impulse production. Okay, body weight to impulse production. That's the key ratio with plyometrics. Okay, so the thing with Nick and with Jan was like, okay, now we're going to do a hurdle hop, land on one leg, and then a jump cut. And what I end up doing then is trying to take these movement patterns that would be very similar to the sport that you're competing in. So if you have a wrestler, a hide and jump like Solidarity just mentioned, is like if we do a depth drop to a side jump to a forward bound, that might be great for a wrestler or a speed skater. That's why it's called a hide and jump. Eric Heiden was a speed skater, so it was something that potentially he had used. So then we're going into how you can get creative and really start to break down movement patterns that you see consistently in these sports. And to mine even deeper, some of the other stuff that we tend to do when we're mining even deeper with this is like, okay, if this is a plyometric, if a plyometric is considered some type of jumping movement pattern done at very high speeds with maximum force, okay, another good example might be having a thrower land on one leg in the middle and rotate. Okay, so they're doing like a plyometric into almost like a reflexive movement. So we can get very creative, but that happens more at that elite level. One of the things that we're doing right now with some of the high school kids that are football players or soccer players, lacrosse players, is like, okay, depth drop to a side, pause, and cut out of that almost like they're running a shuttle. So it really comes down to getting creative, establishing the goal, communicating that goal with the athlete, getting the athlete to understand how quickly they have to recruit. And then when we do this for 6 to 12 weeks. And then that way, when we test again, we can look at, their front squat, their back squat, their single leg squat, their vertical jump, their broad jump, their cleans and all that, and really start to narrow things down into each category. And then we look at it even further, like, okay, impulse is going to be broken down into vertical jump. It's going to be broken down into broad jump. That's what our tests for impulse: vertical jump, broad jump, clean, snatch. Okay. Then we look at their strength movements, and it might be front squat, back squat, single leg squat, bench press, pull-ups. Okay. Then we're looking at speed. Speed's going to be a 10, a 40, a shuttle. That's speed, locomotion based, right? Then we're looking at endurance, and then it's going to be a 5K, a mile test, maybe some type of repeat test on the assault bike. But then you can start to look at it and say, okay, plyometrics are going to have a really big impact on improving those impulse tests. And what's crazy is that then we can start to see a correlation between speed and the impulse test. Then we can start to see, okay, strength and the impulse test. Typically, if somebody has a big front squat, they're going to jump pretty high. Okay, now I don't think it's as high as some people say. Some people will say, like, you've got to have a double body weight to jump 40 inches, double body weight front squat to jump 40 inches. You know, right now I think in the gym we've got probably 4 guys around 38 to 41 inch verts, and maybe one of them can front squat double body weight, but I think it's a pretty close number. So then you can start to create these ratios, and then you can start to use plyometrics based off the ratios and educate your athletes. Hey, if we front squat this or if we back squat this, we can do this with our jumps increasing, okay? And then in turn, we'll see a better production from your impulse long term. And I think that that's just some of the key concepts that we've got to really understand as sports performance coaches, as athletes too, is like all of this stuff like fits together. I don't think you should just do plyometrics. I don't think you should just do weightlifting movements. I don't think you should just do strength movements. I don't think you should just sprint. I think there's got to be this all-encompassing system built, and each sport should be put into a specific area based off of its work to rest ratios and based off of what ends up happening. I did want to bring this up, is like this week, you know, we just got April's NSCA magazine. It's like the effective daily heart rate workloads on preseason, midseason, postseason oxygen consumption in Division I basketball players. An article like that really helps us dial in the work to rest ratios, which can then be used gosh, Sam Black just confused me. He said, you think Sam Black is the most explosive athlete you know? No, I think you're the biggest jerk. You told me that you wanted me to get sucked out of the plane and have my seat ejected. Gosh, my athletes are trolling me. So articles like that help us dial in how much plyometric work we should be doing in actual training. So that's sort of like the crash course intro. I hope that helped to a point. I want to get into two reacts here where we actually talk about it even further and see what you guys think, you know, and then let you chime in your thought processes. So we're going to look at a couple
bounds,
different factors
depth
here.
drops. Plyometrics are proven to increase rate of force development, impulse expression, and even get you freaking faster. These are 10 plyometric exercises that are going to do just that, and we're going to start right. You're doing those exercises. Okay, now, so why do plyometrics help you be more explosive, get stronger? But there's a certain aspect where that tool can be slightly speeds. That's going to make us a little bit twitchier, a little bit more. And then also recruiting at very, very high speeds, that's going to make us a little bit twitchier, a little bit more explosive. We're going to give you 9 more.
Okay, so like something like that is a jump series.
Would be your first set. Let's say your first set of 4 looks like this. Here,
4 cutting.
Boom.
Okay.
Boom.
This, you know, tuck jumps.
Boom.
This is a really great
Second
movement.
set. Okay, you rest a little bit. Let's see, rest about 90 to 120 seconds. Now we can get in here, and we're going here.
To our YouTube channel where you can see the video that we're talking about. Where we take specific
so you can execute
like
those tuck jumps pretty rapidly. Now, the next thing that we could do would be skips for distance. And we want to think about cycling on the right side, 3 reps on the left side. And one thing that you could even do is hit a set of tuck jumps, 5 yards here. Let's say when I'm doing this, I have a target in my mind.
So if you remember,
I want to get 5 yards. First set, I could go here.
The actual sports, okay, and what they're using and their work to rest ratios. If we notice that somebody is going to have more locomotion than they will, let's say strength, well then we can use skip because we know that athlete is more based off of speed.
Oh, okay.
We might do
5
bounds.
sets of 3. Okay. These are all exercises that are bilateral plyometrics and unilateral plyometrics, and that's going to take us into the next 2 movements. So this first exercise is named after using this back foot. Okay, so a lot of people when they first do this, they'll start to roll forward here. They'll get a little bit of a counter movement, but then they put that back foot down. So try to avoid that. That's why the first couple, you'll almost feel like your legs are dead a little bit. After you start to wake that up, you'll start to feel a little bit more twitchy and help you be more explosive from that specific angle. So we're here. Boom.
Jump. Okay.
Boom. Now, my right leg sucks. I'm a little nervous for this one. This is the one that always feels a little dead in my glute. I should have done this one first. So I'm gonna get here.
Let's see, there's a good jump series behind me that's set up. Okay. Let's go into
lateral
one more of
jumps,
these jump
bilateral
series.
jumps,
So here's Jan's
rotational
jump
jumps,
series.
angular jumps. Just you can get
And this is where we're trying to think
creative
about, okay,
with
that's
what
going
you're
to
trying to do. And
apply
this
as a
first
linebacker,
series
right? That's
is
gonna
what
be
we
something
call
that you can
the
use
Jan
as a
jump series.
linebacker.
So we're going to go through this with unilateral jumps.
I think that that's like the big factor here with plyometrics is getting as unique as possible. Oh, this is me with Brandon and Jan. This is back during peak COVID 3 years ago. All right, so there's Brandon, starting linebacker at Pitt, still there. He's been there an eternity. Okay, so you can see, and then Jan's still here. And we're actually, I think we had to train at this time with all the doors open. This was like February or January. So if we get into, let's get to, yes, we're doing a depth drop to a box jump where we rotate, okay? And so we like to do like multiple different jumps that then lead into the next sequence, okay? So we're here, single leg mini hurdle. Oh, nice. Oh, is that Cooper too? I think Cooper's in here too. So Cooper was starting running back at Syracuse and transferred to Vanderbilt. Yeah, and you can see here, like these guys are going to benefit quite a bit from their movement pattern and how they're executing this stuff. It's going to help with their sprinting. It's going to help with their jumping out on the field. It's going to help them cut a little bit more. Wow, what a crazy time that was. What a crazy time thinking back to that. Okay, so I want to check in, see what you guys think right now, see if we've got any comments, and then we're going to get into some of these actual research papers where we're going to look at things like the effects of plyometric jump training on physical fitness in amateur and pro volleyball players. And I think that that's another big one is like a lot of people will see a sport like volleyball or basketball and it's like you always think like, oh, we got to do more plyometrics if the sport has plyometrics. But to some point, you don't want to do too much work that's too plyometric based because you could have a negative impact on how they're actually going to be performing during their sport, during their actual sport. So what are the best plyos for horseback riding? I think that's funny. Anyway, best plyos for being a goalkeeper, I think, would be doing like a depth drop to one leg and then jumping back across. I think doing side band jumps is another great one. EC just said he's in the gym now using peak strength. And that's the one thing, so EC just said, I'm in the gym right now using peak strength. The big factor here is that when we build this stuff out in our app, it's like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how athletes in specific sports, so we break it down, say, okay, are you a combat athlete? Are you a football player, a lacrosse player, a rugby player, a soccer player, a baseball player? And then we're going, when we have seen baseball players or swimmers or basketball players that struggle with specific things, these plyometrics work specifically for that sport. So then we plug that into the program, and then if you have the equipment that you select that is available to you, you select that in peak strength. That's literally how we're building the system. The whole system is built off of these different sport movement patterns so that you guys can then take that, apply it to yourselves, based off, you go over to peakstrength.app and then you break it down and you're like, okay, now I can use this to help become a better athlete so I can achieve those goals of becoming the best possible, football player, lacrosse player, whatever it is that I can possibly be. So that Dane in the replay doesn't look like he could run 10K, let alone a marathon. That's accurate right there. Okay, so let's go into, let's go back to this paper now. Okay, so the effects of plyometric jump training on physical fitness in professional volleyball players. So this is going to be a meta-analysis. So guys, just think about like meta-analysis. That's where we're looking at a large group of papers. They had 18 moderate to high quality papers, and they had over 746 athletes right there. You can see on screen. Okay, so that's what they're looking at. The main findings showed small to moderate effects of PJT. So then you say, well, what's PJT? PJT on linear sprint speed. Okay, so right there, plyometric jump training is PJT. Okay, you have squat jump, counter movement jump, counter movement jump with arm swing, drop jump, and spike jump height. Okay, so essentially if we're doing plyometric based training, we're going to see a moderate to small improvement on linear speed, counter movement, drop jump, spike jump, all these things. Now, if we're at the professional level, if you're dealing with athletes at the professional level, now all of a sudden you might see less of an improvement relative to the intermediate athletes. So we've got to just understand and recognize that, because the professional athlete has likely trained a lot longer. Okay, so these athletes were age over 16. They achieved greater improvements in counter movement jump compared to less than 16 years old, and there was no significant difference between amateur and professional, which is impressive. That's surprising, actually. In conclusion, PJT, that just proved my last statement totally wrong. Plyometric jump training seems safe and is effective in improving measures of physical fitness with volleyball players. So use it. Use it. Okay, now we can get into Olympic weightlifting and plyometric training with children. Okay, similar or greater performance improvements than traditional resistance-based training. So there's like this weird, I almost want to say cultish, like if you do plyos or if you do weightlifting movements, you're gonna have your growth stunted. Like, depth drop stunts your growth. Like, I don't know where people get this stuff from, but essentially here what we're looking at is what happens in comparison to traditional resistance-based training if we're doing weightlifting or we're doing plyometric training. The other aspect that I think is crazy is that people think it's insane if you have like a 6 or a 7-year-old do a snatch. It's like, dude, it's just like gymnastics. It's just like any other sport. They learn it early. Okay, so we got advanced resistance training techniques can be implemented with children. The purpose of this study was to evaluate the Olympic-style weightlifting, plyometrics, and traditional resistance training with children. 63 kids, 10 to 12, were randomly allocated 12-week control of weightlifting, plyometric, or traditional resistance-based training programs. So about 10 years old, they got 12 weeks of a weightlifting program, a plyometric program, or traditional resistance-based program. Pre and post training tests included body mass index, skin folds, counter movement jump, horizontal jump, balance, 5 and 20 meter sprints. They don't specify what balance was tested with. And then isokinetic force and power at 60 and 300 degrees. Okay, so that's solid. So Olympic weightlifting was greater than 80% likely to provide substantially better improvements than plyometric training for counter movement jump. Okay, so think about a vertical jump. We saw a pretty good improvement with 10-year-old kids doing the weightlifting and the horizontal jump and 5 and 20 meter sprint times, whereas 75% likely to substantially exceed traditional resistance training for balance and isokinetic. Plyometric training was greater than 78% likely to elicit substantially better training adaptations than traditional resistance-based training, along with isokinetic force at 60 and 300 degrees. Traditional resistance-based training only exceeded plyometric training for BMI and isokinetic power at 60 degrees. So essentially, if you want to be fast, you should do plyometrics or you should do weightlifting movements. If you want to jump high, you should do plyometrics or you should do weightlifting movements. Maybe you want to have greater isokinetic power at 60 degrees. Well, then just do traditional resistance-based movements. If you ask me, we should do them all. And I think that's, again, going back to EC doing peak strength today at the gym is like, we try and figure out how to do it all based off of our results here at the gym. How do we have so many people in a small sample size jumping 40 inches, so many girls that can jump over 27 inches with their vert? We know how to plan and periodize weightlifting movements. We know how to plan and periodize plyometric movements. Those are the exercises that have a massive amount of force in a short period of time. And we also know that if we can push a single leg, a back squat, or a front squat effectively over time, based off of the myosin attachments, we will see that recruited faster. Okay, so that's like another little thing that we've got to bring up. So weightlifting and plyometrics can provide similar or greater performance adaptations for children. Okay, I think that's huge. And then finally, one more study here before we get into these big time questions. Depth jump for kids? You mean jumping down from a tree? Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was thinking, Keith. There's like, you know, kids jump constantly. Like, and I think the issue is kids almost lose that jumping ability. I think one of the best things too is like trampoline work. So like if you get athletes like on a trampoline, now they're learning. Dude, I think trampoline stuff is just, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's almost a part of, it should be almost considered a part of plyometric work. I really do believe that. I wonder if there's any research on trampoline work, trampoline training, trampoline versus, ooh, here we go. So we're going to break this one down at the end of this. That's going to be an interesting one. So the combination of plyometric and balance training improves sprint and shuttle run performances more often than plyometric only. Dude, this is it. It's like, I said this at the top, right? We shouldn't just do plyos. We shouldn't just do weightlifting exercises. We shouldn't just be squatting all the time. We shouldn't just be sprinting all the time. The whole point here is that when we have an athlete, we've got to understand what their sport qualities need. Okay, what their sport qualities entail. How much endurance work, how much speed work, how much impulse, how much strength. Okay, then you have some type of benchmark that you study and you see, and then you use all of those modalities to push their results so they become better athletes based off their goals. It's easy, right? But it's coming up with that and figuring that out in an actual setting that's worthwhile. Like oftentimes, if we're not in a setting, you might have a coach who says to do something, but they're not actually seeing it applied, and so they don't know if it works or not. I think that's the biggest aspect here is like, we know this works, right? We know it's going to lead to better performance. So balance is not fully developed in children in studies, and it's shown that functional movements with balance-only training can improve. And a combination of plyometric and balance activities might enhance static balance, dynamic balance, and power. One of the things with balance, I think if we looked at it more like control or dynamic trunk control, if we have more control here in the trunk, now our extremities will be more stable, okay, especially at a younger age. So one of the ways here, the objective of this study was to compare the effectiveness of plyo only with balance and plyometric combined training on balance and power measures. So they took an 8-week training period with these athletes. They looked at lower body strength based off of the 1 rep max leg press. They looked at power, which was horizontal and vertical jumps, triple hop for distance, reactive strength, and leg stiffness. They did running speed, 10 and 30s, and then static and dynamic balance. So standing stork test. I actually don't know what that is. I'd be interested to see. So if we look at standing stork test here. Standing stork test. Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. So they're looking at basically standing in a star excursion. Okay. And then they tested the agility, their shuttle run as well. So subjects were randomly divided into 2 training groups, just plyos or combined. And then they had a control group. Based on magnitude-based inferences, the combined training group was considered likely to be superior to the plyo group in leg stiffness, 10-meter sprint, and shuttle run. The difference between the groups was unclear in 8 of the 11 dependent variables. Combined training. So plyometric and balance training. Plyometric and balance training enhance activities such as 10-meter sprint, shuttle runs to a greater degree. And it could be an important consideration for reducing the high velocity impacts of plyo training. So essentially, if we looked at younger athletes and we did, I mean, honestly, you could do some type of yoga poses or anything like that, along with some of the plyometric work. I'm sure we could come up with a creative way to base everything off of, okay, we're going to do this hold or this position or this stretch or this, walking angle, whatever we're going to think about, along with plyometrics. And then ideally that leads to better control of the body. Okay. So that's what we're looking at with that one. Watt per kilogram output. Should combat athletes be able to maintain in different zones. And I'm assuming, Keith, you're talking about endurance. I would want to know, are they on a bike or are they on a treadmill? Andrew, how do you recommend someone without a force plate measure their vertical? I actually like either a touch point like a Vertimax, and I know this is a hokey one, but you actually have like you could get like a Post-it note, you jump and you touch, and then you jump and you touch with the next one, and you try and touch higher, and then you can measure that with like a chair. It's super simple, and it's not the greatest as far as like, it's not going to give you like your absolute peak vert height, but it will show you like if you're making improvements. So I think that that's a easy way to go about doing that. So in 2019, there was a trampoline versus resistance training in young adults with effects on knee muscle strength and balance. And I'm bringing this up because I think that, I have a good friend, Kevin Simons. He was in the CrossFit Games twice. He's coached 2 world championship champs in weightlifting, Harrison Morris. Harrison Morris being one of them, who was a dog, got 4th at the Olympics, probably should get the 3rd place. So I actually would agree with that 20 hill sprints. I don't know about 6 days a week. That might be a little bit much. But 20 hill sprints would be sick. Okay, so let's look at this one. So Kevin, who was in the CrossFit Games twice, he sort of talks about trampoline work a lot. He said like back in the day they would have a small trampoline and him and his brother would basically play horse. Like, can you land this, like do a backflip on the tramper and see what happens. So trampoline parks are becoming popular in many countries, providing recreational facilities for children. This study investigated the effects of training trampoline on knee muscle strength and balance in young adults. So it's ironic because we were just looking at balance and plyometric work, right? So 26 participants, 14 males, 12 females. They did a tramp training, and then they did resistance training groups to undergo a 6-week supervised intervention program, 2 by 30 minutes per week. 30 minutes of tramp work. That's crazy. Basic trampoline exercises, while the resistance training group performed resistance training targeting lower extremity muscles. They don't really specify what that is, but we could click on that study right here and see. So peak knee extension and flexion torque, postural sway, and Y balance tests performance were evaluated before and after. So the results after training, there were significant improvements in knee extension torque, knee flexion torque, dynamic balance. Here, dynamic balance. No difference between groups were found. Trampoline training is as effective as resistance training for improving knee muscles, strength, and dynamic balance. And I think like what we see here, why is that? And this goes back to some of the stuff that we talk about really frequently on the channel is, we talk a lot about like different forms of hypertrophy and different forms of like adaptations. What we know, like mechanical tension plays a big role. So if we're on a trampoline, there's still mechanical tension. So your body still has to make an adaptation, be it neurological or muscular adaptation. So if you're doing that trampoline style training, it's really, really impactful. It's really impactful. I actually still think so. A little off track here. We had a discussion around like if I had a perfect pro day scenario, like I'm training a group for a combine, what would I want? And one of the things I want is a rectangular trampoline to warm up on and to get like the heightened neural drive and to get people, they can be a little bit more mobile, to get the ankles a little bit more awake, to get some more peak knee torque as well. So what if I prefer Hampton Morris to Harrison? I mean, that's a good example there, Andrew, where like Hampton, again, started training at a very young age. I want to say he was 8 or 9. And now he's going to the Olympics. He's an absolute phenom, right? So I think that he's a good example, and he's got a pretty good, it's interesting too, because the biomechanist I spoke with this weekend had tested Hampton in some vertical jumps, and he's like, he has a very, very high vertical jump, but he also has a very unorthodox jumping pattern. So that's some interesting stuff there. So I wanted to share a couple of those papers, and I know we got into an extra one. And I also just wanted to go into some of the stuff around plyometrics and how we use them. I think it comes back to like, we've got to know what they are. High force, short period of time. Okay, we're looking at impulse production. We're looking at body weight to impulse production ratios. Hampton 100% has that dog in him. Then we're looking at what exercises can boost these tests, like a vertical jump or a broad jump, and that could be a front squat, a back squat, a single leg squat, along with other plyometric movements. Then we're going into this, okay, what does jump training or plyometric work do for volleyball players? What does trampoline work do for athletes? Weightlifting and plyometric jumps, all of those things. And then what does plyometric training do for your speed? Okay, does it improve your speed? How frequently should we use it? We wanted to share all that stuff and really start to break everything down. I see that you guys think that 37% of you think you should lift at 10 to 12 versus 13 to 15. I would be interested who wants to argue with me over that? We should argue with that. Let's say watts per kilogram in zone 2 and 5 on a bike for kickboxing. Keith, that is such a niche question, like such a precise question that I don't know. Man, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying, what is it? 400 is off the charts. That's like a world-class endurance cyclist, right? Like when they're in the sprint, that's basically what they're doing. Am I accurate with that? I would think if that's the elite level, 200 for a zone 2, maybe 250 to 300 for zone 5, but I don't know about a kickboxer. So I think the other thing too is, like, with you guys, if you're interested in stuff like this, topics like this, where we break down plyometrics, we break down other movement patterns, we're looking at things that transfer really well to the sports performance realm. Make sure you check out our podcast. Make sure you go check out Garage Strength Podcast. You can listen on Spotify. You can listen on Apple Podcasts as well. Make sure you follow us and post your questions too. When we post something on our community channel or we post something in Discord, post those questions in there, because we will address them, and we will have topics then with our YouTube lives to try and resolve those questions and provide you guys with a solution that you can use moving forward in training. And then in some cases, we've even made improvements in our app, Peak Strength, based off of comments you've put into the community tab or even on Discord. Sean's saying he has a groin injury and cannot train lower body 3 to 4 months. So Sean, my question there would be, you can't do like a stiff-legged RDL or anything like that? Yeah, let me know. So you want to focus heavily on getting strong as hell in the upper body. Any advice on focusing fully in this area? Any advice on focusing fully in this area? Getting strong as hell. You have a groin injury and cannot train lower body 3 to 4 months. So want to focus heavily. I mean, I'm just questioning. Like, you can't do a sled pull or sled push. Do you have like a hernia or something? But you can do upper body. Can you bench and incline? What if you did like in Peak Strength, you would do upper body power day 2. You do a hypertrophy day, and then you could do like one other like bis and tris day. That's what I would hit. What exercise should I do slowly coming back from a hamstring I pull? I pulled it twice in the last 10 months. I would say RDLs, single leg RDLs. I would go leg curls with a super slow eccentric. I would also say, this is for Jordan, that you're probably pulling the hamstring when you were running during acceleration, or you were pulling your hamstring when you would be running at max velocity at toe off. My comprehension is that most hamstring injuries happen at toe off, so I'm interested to see if that's accurate. And again, I think you use like a drop dumbbell snatch or something like that. I think it'll help. How many times do I have to comment for okay? So I'll say this. Somebody had asked about ultimate frisbee, and Andrew has asked multiple times. We are going to have that. We're going to build that out in May, and ideally it would be in by like the end of June. I think it'll be in the app, and I also think that that's a area that we're really going to hammer forward with. I think that it's a underserved community of athletes. I think that ultimate frisbee does remind me of like a corner or a safety in football, maybe lacrosse even. I want to look and see if there's any papers or research on how far someone runs during a competition. I'm going to look right now. Do you ever wear, Andrew? Do you ever wear? Do you ever track how far you run in a game? You know, it's interesting too. I saw somebody when I was coming back home from Oklahoma, where our discus thrower threw the furthest discus throw in 33 years or 36 years. Yaime. When we were on the Skylink in Dallas, there was somebody wearing they were going to like the World Championships for the game that's like made up off of Harry Potter, where they like run around with a broomstick. I thought that was an interesting one. Let me look here. And how many miles do you wait? One full game of Ultimate can consist of about up to 10 miles of sprinting. Do you think that's accurate? Do you really think you're running 10 miles? How far are you running in a game there, Andrew? You gotta give me some research. 10 miles seems an ungodly far amount in one game. I mean, even in soccer, they're running only about 7. Okay, so Jordan's saying he pulled his hamstring coming out of the blocks during first practice. So that typically what happened is, instead of coming out of the blocks here, you likely broke, like if this is your hip, you're likely breaking the hip here, which lengthens the hamstring very aggressively and then can lead to doing that. And Exodus Strength Performance just commented, if somebody does play Ultimate and they use their GPS, that'd be great. Owen's in the chat. What's up, Owen? Depends on the position you play and how many subs you have. So I would just say, Andrew, like, give me like a real generic response, like as generic as it gets. You know, in most cases, you're going to see this distance run. I have a couple here on Reddit that said, 5 to 6 miles would be a long run. A 60-minute game with 2 subs. They had 4 kilometers, which is much less. 4 kilometers is not that far. I mean, that seems a little bit more realistic, actually. Like if you're running, I think 3 to 5 miles is like much more. Yeah, this other person said I've been tracking with a Garmin and it's been around 3.7 to 4 miles, which whoever said 10 miles, I'm like, you're insane. Monday's practice, Andrew ran 2.4 miles in one session there. So that does make sense. And Owen was asking, how would you start off training a 14-year-old as a running back? Well, the first thing I do with 14-year-olds, so if they're in 8th grade, I want to test them. I want to look at their bench, their back squat, their single leg squat, their clean, their vertical jump, their broad jump, their 40, and their 10. And then I can look at that and then I can say, okay, this is their glaring weakness. Okay, this is where the low-hanging fruit is. Typically at 14, their squats are terrible. Typically their cleans are terrible. Typically they have almost no absolute strength. So we can hit that first. Okay, so we try to build up some strength. They learn these patterns. They work through all that. And then after that, we start to bring in, after we do like 8 to 12 weeks of just traditional resistance-based training, we're going to bring in more plyometrics. We're going to use plyometrics once a week for probably about 30 weeks. Okay, after you use just plyometrics for about 30 weeks, now we might bring in some speed work. Okay, so that's how I would build that out. Owen's saying his hip flexor is still jacked up. What if we pull one of the leg days out of there, or if we I'm thinking maybe pull out one leg day out of your program. Let me know what you think about that and see if that helps with your recovery. It could potentially help you quite a bit with recovery. Thank you, Sean. This is the best channel on YouTube for this type of thing. Thank you. And that's why we want to keep doing these lives. They're fun. How would you structure endurance training for kickboxing or MMA? Okay, so I'm not sure if I have this up, but what I try to do is looking at in-season, out-of-season, post-season. I want to look at, okay, kickboxing would be sport depth type 3. Okay, so sport depth 3, when I'm looking at that, well, the next thing then would be like, all right, I want to, sorry, I just opened something that, when I'm looking at sport depth 3, all right, I want to say probably each week, because you're going to do a decent amount of endurance work. in your training, I want to look at your 5K, and I also want to look at your 1 minute intervals on the assault bike. Let's say you do 10 1 minute intervals with a minute rest. And we want to push that as high as we can. So can you hold 75 to 80 RPMs on an assault bike, for 10 minutes basically with 1 minute rest? And then we're going to compare that to your 5K. And then I'm going to look at it and be like, yo, your 5K is trash. We need to do more long, slow distance. Or, hey, your assault bikes, your intervals are trash. Okay, so we need to improve your high intensity work. So I think that's the best way. I think that's the best way to look at it, Keith, if that helps. How would you describe this weekend with Jaime's performance and then watching Alekna break the world record? I think for me, it's like it was such a fun moment in the history of track and field and the history of throwing. And to play a pivotal role with Jason getting all the content and footage and being able to finally provide look, the throwing world has so much footage and so much content from this weekend because we were there and because Jason killed it and because, Jaime's our athlete too. And also the cool thing with Jaime is she had to get her visa to go to China on last week, and then my mom had to go down and pick it up, and then Sam Weeks picks her up to bring her to training. I will drop her off at training oftentimes. I'm trying to help her as much as possible to get everything lined up. She just got her permanent residency. Now she's in China for the Diamond League. Then she goes and throws 73 meters, which is the furthest throw since 1988. And it's dude, there's so many moving parts. And then to see Alex go 68 meters, Alekna breaks a world record, and to be a part of it, and all of my throwers that were there, the whole team was there, and I think that's what else was cool. Almost the whole team was there, so it's it was just a good weekend for camaraderie, and I think that's the part I love about coaching, and that's the part. It's that experience and being part of those historic moments, literally historic moments. It happened, we were there. We've helped and contributed, and Jaime does all the work. She works so freaking hard, and she deals with so much stress, and for her to go out and perform like that, it's a moment of total pride as a coach. So I think it just really, it was cool. It was so cool. It's special, and I think that a lot of people, you see Jaime, she's got a 29-inch vertical, right? She snatches 105 or 104. She can clean 300 pounds. And she's just jacked, right? And then you don't often see her softer or more emotional side. And I think, not that it's soft. I don't think it's soft to be emotional. I actually think if you're emotional, you're tougher because you're expressing what you feel. You're not hiding it. You're confident in who you are, and you express that. And she did that. And I think that was a special moment. I'm going to answer Owen's question. Then I got to get down to go coach. Owen. And it's only the end range of motion of the opposite leg. It's so weird when my muscles don't have a hard time. My muscle doesn't have a hard time contracting, but when running sprints at full bore, doing heavy single leg squats, that's when he's feeling his hip flexor. It feels as though it's going to rip off the leg. Yeah, I think that we could take that out a little bit. Okay. Do you recommend doing sprints twice a week to improve my vertical jump? My main goal is to dunk a basketball. I think you could just do vertical jump based training, once a week to start, and see how you improve after 5 weeks and see what happens. I'll give you a little secret. We have this old program. It's called the Vertical Jump Manifesto, and we don't try to send people to it, but it's a cool program that could help with your vertical jump, or just get the jumps program inside Peak Strength. That's going to get you the biggest savage vertical jump improvement. Until next time, peace.